The cold autumn rain beat relentlessly against Eliza Caldwell's face as she clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, one hand protectively cradling her swollen belly beneath the soaked fabric. Her father's final words still rang in her ears, cutting deeper than the biting wind of the Idaho Territory. "No daughter of mine brings such shame upon this family," he had spat, throwing her meager belongings onto the muddy street of Shoshone. The year was 1878, and at 22 years old, Eliza found herself utterly alone in the world, 6 months pregnant, and with nowhere to turn. Eliza stumbled forward, her boots sinking into the mud of the main street as lightning cracked overhead, illuminating the frontier town for a brief moment. Most businesses had shuttered for the night, lanterns extinguished against the gathering storm. The few establishments still showing light were saloons no place for a woman in her condition. Tears mingled with raindrops on her cheeks as she continued her desperate march toward nowhere in particular. Miss, you shouldn't be out in this weather." A deep voice called out over the rumbling thunder. Eliza turned, squinting through the downpour to see a tall figure approaching on horseback. The man pulled his mount to a stop beside her, and even through the rain, she could make out concerned blue eyes beneath the brim of a worn Stetson. "I'm fine," Eliza managed, her voice nearly lost to another crash of thunder. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, leading his chestnut mare closer. "Begging your pardon, madam, but you're soaked through and—" His eyes flickered briefly to her middle before returning respectfully to her face, "and in no condition to be wandering in this storm." "I have nowhere to go," Eliza admitted, shame coloring her words despite her desperate situation. "My father has cast me out." The man's jaw tightened, and even in the dim light, Eliza could see anger flash across his features. "The name's Samuel Clayton," he said after a moment, his voice gentler now. "I've got a small ranch just outside of town. You can stay at my place until this weather breaks at least." Eliza hesitated. She knew nothing of this man, but the alternative was spending the night in the rain. As if sensing her thoughts, another fierce gust of wind slashed across her face, and she shivered violently. "I give you my word as a gentleman," Samuel added, removing his duster and carefully draping it over her shoulders. "I've got a spare room, warm food and dry clothes that belonged to my late sister. No strings attached." The sincerity in his eyes convinced her more than his words. With trembling hands, Eliza accepted his help onto the horse. Samuel swung up behind her, keeping a respectful distance while still ensuring she wouldn't fall. "I'm Eliza," she said, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Eliza Caldwell." "Well, Miss Caldwell," Samuel replied, urging his horse forward through the muddy street, "let's get you somewhere warm." The ride to Samuel's ranch took nearly half an hour through the driving rain. By the time they arrived, Eliza was shivering uncontrollably despite Samuel's heavy coat. The small ranch house came into view like a beacon in the night, a single lantern burning in the window. Samuel helped Eliza down from the horse with careful hands before leading the animal to a modest barn. "Wait inside," he instructed, pressing a key into her palm. "I'll just be a moment getting Penny settled." Eliza nodded gratefully and made her way to the porch. The small house was simple but sturdy, built of logs with obvious care. Inside, she found a tidy main room with a stone fireplace, modest furnishings, and bookshelves lining one wall. To her relief, embers still glowed in the hearth. True to his word, Samuel returned quickly. He entered with an armful of firewood, kicking the door closed against the howling wind. "Let me get this fire going properly," he said, kneeling to build up the flames. "Then I'll show you to the spare room and find you something dry to wear." As the fire blazed to life, Eliza felt the first real warmth she'd experienced in hours seep into her bones. Samuel disappeared briefly and returned with a bundle of clothing and a towel. "These were my sister Catherine's," he explained, offering them to Eliza. "She was tall, but they should serve until your own things dry. The bedroom is just through that door. I'll put some coffee on while you change." Eliza accepted the clothes gratefully. "Thank you, Mr. Clayton. I don't know how I can repay your kindness." Samuel waved off her thanks. "No decent man would leave a woman in your condition out in weather like this." His gaze was direct but respectful. "And it's just Samuel, if you please." In the small bedroom, Eliza peeled off her sodden garments. Catherine Clayton must have been nearly as tall as her brother, but the simple cotton nightgown and robe Samuel had provided fit well enough over Eliza's pregnant form. When she emerged, Samuel was placing a steaming mug on the small table near the fire. "It's not much," he apologized, "but the coffee's hot and there's bread and stew if you're hungry." Eliza accepted the coffee, wrapping her fingers around the warm mug. "This is more than enough. I can't thank you enough for taking me in." Samuel busied himself ladling stew into a bowl. "You mentioned your father cast you out," he said carefully. "Is there anyone else? The child's father, perhaps?" Eliza stiffened. "He's gone. James was passing through Shoshone on business. He promised to return for me, but—" She trailed off, the familiar ache of betrayal rising in her chest. "That was 5 months ago." Samuel nodded, his expression unreadable as he placed the bowl before her. "I'm sorry to hear that. Eat now, and we can talk more in the morning if you wish." That night, Eliza slept in a real bed for the first time in weeks. Her father had banished her to the shed behind their house when her condition became impossible to hide, ashamed to have his unwed, pregnant daughter under his roof. Now, wrapped in clean blankets with the storm raging outside, Eliza allowed herself to weep silently for everything she had lost. When morning came, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed, clean world in brilliant sunshine. Eliza woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, her stomach growling in response. She dressed quickly in her now dry clothes and ventured out to the main room. Samuel stood at the stove, his back to her. In the daylight, Eliza could see him clearly for the first time. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. When he turned, she noted the strong line of his jaw, softened somewhat by kind eyes. "Good morning," he greeted her. "Hope you slept well. Breakfast is just about ready." "I did, thank you," Eliza replied, hesitantly taking a seat at the table. "Mr. Clayton, Samuel, I appreciate your hospitality, but I should return to town today. I need to find work and a place to stay." Samuel placed a plate of eggs and bacon before her. "No rush," he said simply. "Winter's coming on fast and jobs are scarce in Shoshone this time of year, especially for—" He glanced briefly at her condition. "For unwed mothers," Eliza finished for him, chin lifting slightly. "I'm aware of my circumstances, Mr. Clayton." Samuel had the grace to look abashed. "That's not what I meant to imply. It's just that most work available to women is hard physical labor. The laundry, the hotel, they'll work you until you drop, pregnant or not." Eliza knew he was right. Her father owned the general store in town, where she had worked since her mother's death 5 years prior. That position was now lost to her, along with her home and family name. "I can't impose on you," she insisted. "You've already done more than enough." Samuel sat across from her, his expression earnest. "Miss Caldwell, I have a proposition for you. It's not charity but a fair exchange." He gestured around the modest cabin. "As you can see, I live simply. I spend most days working the ranch, which doesn't leave much time for keeping house. I could use help with cooking, cleaning, maybe tending a kitchen garden come spring." Eliza eyed him warily. "And in exchange, "Room, board, and a small wage," Samuel replied promptly. "The arrangement would last as long as it suits us both. When the baby comes, we'll figure things out from there." It was a generous offer, suspiciously so. Why would you do this for a stranger? For someone in my situation? Something flickered across Samuel's face, pain, perhaps, or memory. "My sister Catherine found herself in similar circumstances once. She didn't have anyone to help her. I couldn't do anything for her then, but I can help you now." The simplicity and sincerity of his answer moved Eliza. Still, caution prevailed. "I would need my own space, and to be clear about expectations." Samuel nodded. "Of course. The arrangement would be strictly professional. You'd have your privacy, and I give you my word that I'll conduct myself as a gentleman." Eliza considered the offer. She had limited options, and winter in Idaho Territory could be brutal. At least here she would have shelter, food, and time to figure out her next steps. "Very well," she agreed finally. "Until spring, then we'll reassess." Relief flooded Samuel's features. "Good, that's good." Over the following week, Eliza settled into life at the Clayton Ranch. The small property was well maintained, with a modest herd of cattle, a vegetable garden that had seen better days, and a few chickens. Samuel worked from dawn until dusk, returning each evening tired but satisfied with his day's labor. For her part, Eliza found purpose in restoring order to the bachelor's home. She cleaned thoroughly, organized the pantry, and prepared hearty meals that Samuel devoured with obvious appreciation. Neither mentioned the temporary nature of their arrangement. On Eliza's 8th day at the ranch, Samuel returned from town with supplies and news. "Your father was at the general store," he said carefully over dinner. "He asked if anyone had seen you." Eliza's hand trembled slightly as she set down her fork. "Did he seem concerned?" Samuel's expression hardened. "Not in the way a father should be. He was warning folks not to take you in, saying you'd bring shame on any decent household." The words stung, though they weren't surprising. Eliza had known her father's pride ran deeper than his love for her from the moment he discovered her condition. "I told him I hadn't seen you," Samuel continued, studying her reaction. "Thought it best not to stir up trouble until you decide what you want to do." "Thank you," Eliza said quietly. "I have no desire to see him, not after what he said when he threw me out." She pushed her plate away, appetite gone. "He called me a whore, his own daughter." Samuel's jaw tightened. Some men don't deserve the title of father. The simple statement, delivered with such conviction, brought tears to Eliza's eyes. She blinked them away quickly and rose to clear the table, but Samuel caught her wrist gently. "Eliza," he said, her name sounding different somehow in his deep voice. "You don't have to hide your feelings here. And you don't have to earn your keep every minute of the day. You're allowed to rest." Something in his kindness broke through the careful walls she had built around herself. Before she could stop them, tears spilled down her cheeks. Samuel released her wrist immediately, looking alarmed. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to upset you." Eliza shook her head, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. "You didn't. It's just, no one has been kind to me since James left. Even before my father discovered I was with child, there was only disapproval and judgment." Samuel stood and, after a moment's hesitation, offered her his handkerchief. "Well, there'll be none of that here. What's past is past. All that matters now is taking care of yourself and the little one." Eliza accepted the handkerchief gratefully. "You're a good man, Samuel Clayton. Catherine was lucky to have you as a brother." A shadow passed across Samuel's face. "I wasn't there when she needed me most," he said quietly. "She died before I could make things right." Sensing the depth of pain behind his words, Eliza didn't press for details. Instead, she finished clearing the table in companionable silence. the air between them somehow changed by their exchange. As October gave way to November, the first snowfall blanketed the ranch in pristine white. Eliza stood at the window, watching the fat flakes swirl in the morning light, one hand absently rubbing her growing belly. The baby had been active lately, kicking and turning as if impatient to enter the world. The door opened behind her, bringing a gust of cold air, and Samuel, his arms laden with firewood. Snowflakes clung to his dark hair and the shoulders of his coat. "It's coming down hard," he announced, stamping his boots on the mat. "Might be snowed in for a day or two." Eliza turned from the window. "I've made flapjacks and coffee. You must be frozen through." Samuel grinned, the expression transforming his usually serious face. A man could get used to having hot breakfast waiting after chores. The casual comment hung between them, laden with implications neither was ready to address. Eliza busied herself at the stove while Samuel removed his coat and washed up. Over breakfast, Samuel cleared his throat. "I was thinking," he began hesitantly, "that we should go into town tomorrow, weather permitting. You'll need some things for the baby and—" He paused, coloring slightly. "And you might want to see the doctor, just to make sure everything's progressing as it should." Eliza tensed. Going into town meant risking an encounter with her father or enduring the stares and whispers of townsfolk who would surely have heard of her disgrace by now. "I don't think that's wise," she said carefully. Your father doesn't own the town," Samuel interrupted, his voice firm. "And you need proper care. Dr. Wilson is a good man, discreet. He won't turn you away." Eliza considered his words. She had been experiencing some discomfort lately, nothing alarming but enough to make her wonder if everything was proceeding normally. And the baby would need clothes, blankets, and other necessities she couldn't fashion from what was available at the ranch. "Very well," she conceded. "But I'd rather avoid the main street if possible." Samuel nodded. "We'll be careful. I'll hitch up the wagon early, and we can be in and out before most folks are about their business." The following morning dawned clear and cold. True to his word, Samuel had the wagon ready at first light, with heated bricks wrapped in blankets to keep Eliza's feet warm during the journey. He helped her up onto the seat with careful hands that lingered perhaps a moment longer than necessary on her arm. The trip to Shoshone took longer than usual with the snow-covered roads, but they arrived just as the town was beginning to stir. Samuel drove directly to the doctor's modest office on a side street, well away from the general store. "I'll wait right here," he assured her as he helped her down from the wagon. "Take as long as you need, Doctor." Wilson proved to be exactly as Samuel had described: kind, professional, and mercifully free of judgment. He confirmed that Eliza's pregnancy was progressing normally and estimated she would deliver sometime in early February. "You're in good health, Miss Caldwell," the doctor told her, helping her to sit up on the examining table. "But I must stress the importance of rest in these final months. No heavy lifting or strenuous work." Eliza nodded, relief flooding through her. "Is there anything else I should know?" "About the birth itself," Dr. Wilson smiled kindly. "First babies often take their time coming into the world. When the time comes, send for me if you can, but if the weather's bad or there's no time." He handed her a small pamphlet. "This contains basic instructions. Many women deliver without a doctor's assistance, especially out on the homesteads." The thought of giving birth alone sent a spike of fear through Eliza, but she accepted the pamphlet with steady hands. "Thank you, Doctor." When she emerged from the office, Samuel straightened immediately from where he'd been leaning against the wagon. "Everything all right?" Eliza nodded, touched by the genuine concern in his eyes. "Everything is fine. The baby is healthy and should arrive in early February." The relief on Samuel's face was palpable. Good, that's good. I thought we might stop at Hendrick's Mercantile next. They carry baby things and they're good people. Won't gossip. The Mercantile was mercifully quiet at that early hour. Mrs. Hendricks, a plump, motherly woman, fussed over Eliza and helped her select soft flannel for diapers, tiny gowns, and a beautiful crocheted blanket. "This one's special," Mrs. Hendricks confided, pressing the blanket into Eliza's hands. "Made it myself." Every child deserves something beautiful to be wrapped in when they come into this world. When Eliza protested that she couldn't afford such a luxury, the older woman waved her off. "Consider it a gift. Lord knows new mothers need all the help they can get." Samuel, who had been examining a display of tools nearby, appeared at Eliza's side with a small wooden cradle. "This should do nicely," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Sturdy but light enough to move between rooms." Eliza stared at him. "Samuel, I can't let you, please," he interrupted quietly. "Let me do this." Something in his voice stopped her objection. She nodded instead and was rewarded with one of his rare, transformative smiles. They had nearly completed their purchases when the bell above the door jingled. Eliza turned instinctively and found herself face to face with her father, Harold Caldwell. Time seemed to stop as father and daughter stared at each other across the Mercantile. Harold's gaze dropped to Eliza's prominent belly, then to the baby items on the counter, and finally to Samuel standing protectively at her side. "So," Harold said, his voice cold with contempt, "you found someone willing to take in damaged goods." Samuel stepped forward, but Eliza placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Father," she acknowledged, summoning every ounce of dignity she possessed, "I hope you are well." Harold's lip curled. "Don't father me. You made your choice when you opened your legs for that traveling salesman." Mrs. Hendricks gasped behind the counter, and Samuel's entire body went rigid with anger. "Mr. Caldwell," Samuel said, his voice dangerously controlled, "you're speaking about the mother of my future godchild. I suggest you mind your words carefully." Harold's eyes narrowed. "Godchild? Is that what you're calling it?" He looked at Eliza with undisguised disgust. "I always thought you were smarter than your mother, girl. Turns out you're just as much a fool, believing sweet words from men who only want one thing." Eliza flinched as if struck, but forced herself to stand tall. "Think what you will of me, father. But remember this, you turned away your only daughter and your grandchild when we needed you most. That shame is yours to carry, not mine." Before Harold could respond, Samuel placed their payment on the counter and gathered their purchases. "Mrs. Hendricks, thank you for your help. Mr. Caldwell, good day." With gentle firmness, he guided Eliza out of the store and helped her into the wagon. They were halfway out of town before either spoke. "I'm sorry you had to witness that," Eliza finally said, her voice barely audible over the creak of the wagon wheels on snow. Samuel's hands tightened on the reins. "You have nothing to apologize for. Your father, on the other hand." He trailed off, jaw clenched. "He wasn't always so harsh," Eliza found herself saying. "After my mother died, something in him changed. It was like all the warmth went out of him." Samuel was quiet for so long that Eliza thought he hadn't heard her. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Grief can poison a man if he lets it, but it's no excuse for turning away family." He glanced at her briefly. "You deserved better, Eliza. You and your child both." The simple declaration, spoken with such conviction, brought a lump to Eliza's throat. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." That night after dinner, Samuel disappeared into the barn and returned carrying something large and awkwardly shaped, covered with a blanket. "I've been working on this in the evenings," he explained, setting it down in the main room. "Wasn't sure if it would be ready in time, but after today." He pulled off the blanket to reveal a beautifully crafted rocking chair, the wood polished to a warm glow. Eliza stared at it in disbelief. "You made this?" "For me," Samuel nodded, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "Figured you'd need somewhere comfortable to sit with the baby. For feeding and such." Eliza ran her hand over the smooth wood, feeling the care that had gone into every inch. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I've never received such a thoughtful gift." "Try it out," Samuel urged and helped her lower herself into the chair. The rocker fit her perfectly, with a high back that supported her shoulders and arms at just the right height for holding a baby. Eliza moved gently, setting the chair into a soothing rhythm. "Perfect," she whispered and looked up to find Samuel watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. "It suits you," he said quietly. Then, clearing his throat, he added, "I should check on the animals before turning in. Good night, Eliza." "Good night, Samuel," she replied, watching him go with confused emotions swirling in her chest. That night, Eliza lay awake long after the house had gone quiet, her hand resting on her belly as the baby moved within her. She thought of Samuel's quiet strength, his kindness, and the way his rare smiles transformed his entire face. She thought of the rocking chair, lovingly crafted in secret during precious hours of rest after long days of work. "Oh," she whispered into the darkness, the realization washing over her like a wave. "Oh dear." December brought heavy snows that all but isolated the ranch from town. Samuel worked tirelessly to keep paths clear and animals fed, often returning to the house with frost in his beard and exhaustion in his eyes. Despite Eliza's protests, he insisted on handling all the physically demanding tasks, reminding her of Dr. Wilson's instructions to rest. On Christmas Eve, Eliza was putting the finishing touches on dinner when Samuel came in from the barn, carrying a small pine tree. "Thought we might need this," he said, setting it up in the corner of the main room. "It's not much, but no home should be without a Christmas tree." Home. The word settled in Eliza's chest with surprising weight. Somehow, in the month since that rainy night when Samuel had found her on the street, this small ranch had become more of a home than the house she'd grown up in ever was. "It's perfect," she assured him. "I have just the thing to decorate it." While Samuel washed up for dinner, Eliza retrieved a small bundle from her room paper stars she had carefully crafted during quiet afternoons, and a garland made from popcorn and dried berries. Together, they adorned the modest tree, their hands occasionally brushing in a way that sent warmth through Eliza's entire body. "I have something for you," Samuel said when they'd finished. "It's not much, but—" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. Eliza accepted it with trembling fingers. Inside was a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. "Samuel," she breathed, running her thumb over the engraved surface. "It's beautiful." "Open it," he urged, his voice oddly husky. Inside was a tiny portrait, a copy of the photograph of her mother that Eliza had kept on her bedside table, the only possession from her former life that she truly treasured. "How did you?" she began, tears welling in her eyes. "I took it to the photographer in Boys when I went for supplies last month," Samuel explained. "Thought you might want to keep her close, and someday maybe put the baby on the other side." Overcome, Eliza did something she had never done before. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Samuel in a tight embrace. After a startled moment, his arms came around her, careful of her belly between them. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "I don't have anything for you." Samuel's hand came up to cradle the back of her head, his touch impossibly gentle. "You've brought life back to this house," he said quietly. "That's gift enough." They stood like that, wrapped in each other's arms until the baby kicked strongly enough for Samuel to feel it against his abdomen. He pulled back slightly, looking down at Eliza with wonder. Was that? Eliza nodded, smiling through her tears. Someone's eager for Christmas dinner, I think. Samuel's hand hovered uncertainly. May I? At Eliza's nod, he placed his large, calloused hand on her belly. The baby obligingly kicked again, and Samuel's face lit with a joy that took Eliza's breath away. "Hello there, little one," he whispered. In that moment, something fundamental shifted between them. As they moved to the table for Christmas dinner, Eliza knew that their carefully maintained boundaries had irrevocably changed. The question was, what would come next? January brought the coldest temperatures Eliza had ever experienced. The world outside the cabin windows was a frozen wasteland of white, broken only by the dark shapes of the barn and corrals. Inside, however, was warmth, comfort, and increasingly, an undeniable tension between Eliza and Samuel. Since Christmas Eve, something had changed in their interactions. Samuel's gaze lingered on her when he thought she wasn't looking. His hand often found reasons to touch hers, passing a cup, helping her from a chair, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Each touch sent sparks through Eliza's body, awakening feelings she had thought died with James's betrayal. One evening, as they sat before the fire after dinner, Eliza working on tiny garments for the baby while Samuel mended a bridle, she finally found the courage to ask the question that had been weighing on her mind. What happens after the baby comes? Samuel's hand stilled on the leather. What do you mean? Eliza set aside her sewing. Our arrangement was until spring. The baby will come before then. I need to know what to expect, where we'll go. Samuel looked at her, his expression unreadable in the firelight. Do you want to go somewhere else? No, Eliza admitted softly. But I can't stay here indefinitely out of charity. It's not charity, Samuel said sharply. Then, more gently, it never was. Then what is it? Eliza pressed, her heart pounding. What am I to you, Samuel? Samuel set the bridle aside and moved to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. You're the woman who's made my house a home, he said, his voice rough with emotion. The woman I think about from the moment I wake until I close my eyes at night. The woman I want to build a future with if you'll have me. Eliza stared at him, scarcely daring to believe what she was hearing. But the baby will be my child in every way that matters, Samuel interrupted firmly. I'll love him or her as my own, I swear it. And what of James? Eliza asked, needing to be certain, if he were to return. Samuel's expression hardened. The man abandoned you when you needed him most. He forfeited any right to you or the child. His grip on her hands tightened slightly. But if he did return, I would fight for you, Eliza, for both of you. Tears welled in Eliza's eyes. I never thought I would find this, she whispered. After everything, I never thought I would find someone who could see beyond my mistakes. Loving someone isn't a mistake, Samuel said gently. Trusting the wrong person doesn't make you unworthy of happiness. He reached up to cup her cheek. I love you, Eliza Caldwell. I think I have since that first night when you stood so brave and proud in the rain. I love you too, Eliza admitted, the words both terrifying and liberating. I've been afraid to say it, afraid to trust these feelings after being so wrong before. I'm not James, Samuel promised. I won't leave you, either of you. When he leaned forward to kiss her, Eliza met him halfway. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, the kiss a promise more binding than any vow. That night, Samuel slept on the floor beside Eliza's bed at her insistence. I want to do things properly, she had explained, for the baby's sake and for ours. Samuel had agreed without hesitation. I'll speak to the preacher next time I'm in town, he promised, if you're certain this is what you want. More certain than I've ever been, Eliza assured him. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of happiness and preparation. Samuel rode into Shoshone through the snow to speak with the preacher, who agreed to come to the ranch when the weather permitted to perform a small ceremony. He returned from town with a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother, and formal documentation declaring his intention to adopt Eliza's child once it was born. "So there can be no question," he explained, showing her the papers. "The baby will be a Clayton in name and law." Eliza had wept at this final proof of his commitment, overwhelmed by the contrast between the man who had abandoned her and the one who now moved heaven and earth to make her and her child secure. On the last day of January, as a bitter winter storm raged outside, Eliza woke in the pre-dawn hours to a sharp pain in her lower back. She lay still, waiting to see if it would pass, but another followed soon after. When her waters broke an hour later, she knew with certainty that her time had come. "Samuel," she called, her voice tight with pain. "Samuel, the baby's coming." He was at her door in an instant, hair tousled from sleep, but eyes alert with concern. "I'll ride for the doctor." Eliza shook her head, gesturing to the window where snow was blowing horizontally past the glass. "You'll never make it in this storm. We'll have to manage ourselves." Fear flashed across Samuel's face, but he nodded resolutely. "Tell me what to do." The next 12 hours were the most challenging of Eliza's life. The labor progressed steadily, each contraction stronger than the last. Samuel proved an unexpectedly capable birth attendant, following Dr. Wilson's pamphlet instructions with steady hands and calm words of encouragement. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known," he told her during a particularly difficult moment. "Just a little more, Eliza. You can do this." As the short winter day faded into evening, Eliza gave a final, tremendous push, and her child entered the world with a lusty cry. Samuel caught the baby in clean towels, his hands trembling but sure. "A boy," he announced, his voice thick with emotion. "A beautiful, perfect boy." He laid the squalling infant on Eliza's chest, and the moment she felt that warm weight, all the pain and fear melted away. She looked down at her son's red, wrinkled face with overwhelming love. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I'm your mama." Samuel sat beside them on the bed, one arm around Eliza's shoulders, the other hand gently touching the baby's head. "He's magnificent," he said in awe. "You both are." After helping Eliza clean up and change into a fresh nightgown, Samuel brought her hot broth and tea. He watched in fascinated silence as she nursed the baby for the first time, his expression a mixture of wonder and deep tenderness. "What will you call him?" he asked as the newborn dozed at her breast. Eliza looked up at Samuel, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain. "I thought perhaps William, after your father, William Samuel Clayton." Samuel's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You want to give him my name, even before we're married. He is your son," Eliza said simply, "in all the ways that truly matter." 2 days later, when the storm finally abated, Samuel rode into town to fetch Dr. Wilson. The doctor examined both mother and child, pronouncing them in excellent health. "You did well," he told Samuel. "Not many men would have handled such a situation with such competence." "I had excellent motivation," Samuel replied, looking at Eliza and William with undisguised adoration. The preacher accompanied Dr. Wilson back to the ranch the following Sunday. In a simple ceremony before the fireplace, with baby William sleeping peacefully in a cradle nearby, Samuel and Eliza exchanged vows. "I take you as you are," Samuel promised, sliding his mother's ring onto Eliza's finger. "You and William both. From this day forward, we're a family." "A family," Eliza echoed, the words sweet on her tongue. That's all I ever truly wanted. Spring came early that year, the snow melting to reveal tender green shoots pushing through the soil. On a mild April morning, Eliza sat in her rocking chair on the porch, nursing 2-month-old William while Samuel worked in the newly planted kitchen garden. "He's getting so big," Samuel observed, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow. "Going to be tall like his pa." The casual way he referred to himself as William's father never failed to warm Eliza's heart. In the months since their wedding, Samuel had proven himself a devoted husband and an adoring father. Each night, he insisted on taking the baby after Eliza's last feeding, walking the floor with William against his broad shoulder until the infant drifted off to sleep. "I was thinking," Eliza said, adjusting William as he finished nursing, "that the cabin might be getting a bit small for us." Samuel looked up from the garden, curiosity in his eyes. "Oh, are you wanting to move elsewhere?" "Not at all," Eliza replied quickly. "But perhaps we might consider adding another room for the future." Understanding dawned on Samuel's face. "The future, as in?" "As in more children," Eliza confirmed, smiling at his expression. "Not right away, but someday, if you want that." Samuel crossed to the porch in 3 long strides, kneeling beside her chair to look into her eyes. "Nothing would make me happier than filling this house with our children," he said fervently. "A whole brood of little Claytons running about." Eliza laughed, touching his dirt-smudged cheek. "Let's start with an addition to the cabin and see where life takes us." "Agreed," Samuel said, leaning in to kiss her softly. "Though I should warn you, Claytons tend to come in large numbers. My parents had 6 of us." "6?" Eliza exclaimed in mock horror. "Perhaps we should plan for 2 additions, then." Their laughter woke William, who blinked up at them with curious eyes that were already showing signs of turning blue like Samuel's. "What do you think, son?" Samuel asked, gently taking the baby from Eliza's arms. "Would you like some brothers and sisters someday?" William's response was a contented gurgle as he grabbed for his father's finger with a surprisingly strong grip. "I'll take that as a yes," Samuel chuckled, sitting on the porch step with his son cradled against his chest. Watching them together, Eliza marveled at how completely her life had transformed in the span of less than a year. From the depths of despair on that rainy night in Shoshone to this moment of perfect happiness, all because one kind-hearted cowboy had said, "You can stay at my place." "I love you," she said softly. "Both of you more than I ever thought possible." Samuel looked up at her, his eyes reflecting the same wonder she felt. "And we love you, Mrs. Clayton, forever and always." 5 years later, on a bright summer morning, Eliza stood at the stove in her considerably expanded kitchen, stirring a pot of oatmeal while keeping an eye on 3-year-old Catherine, who was determinedly setting the table with wooden spoons. "Mama, is Papa back yet?" William asked from the doorway, his 5-year-old face serious beneath a shock of dark hair that matched Samuel's exactly. "Not yet, sweetheart," Eliza replied, "but he should be home from boys any time now." As if summoned by her words, the sound of hoofbeats approached the house. William let out a whoop of excitement and raced for the door, with Catherine toddling after him as fast as her little legs would carry her. "Papa's home! Papa's home!" Their voices chorused. Eliza smiled, wiping her hands on her apron as she followed her children outside. Samuel was dismounting from his horse, a large package secured behind his saddle. At the sight of his family, his face broke into the warm smile that still made Eliza's heart skip a beat. "There's my welcome committee," he exclaimed, scooping Catherine up with one arm and ruffling William's hair with his free hand. "Have you been good for your mama?" "Yes, sir," William answered promptly. "I helped with the chickens and everything, and I set the table," Catherine added, not to be outdone. Samuel kissed his daughter's cheek. "That's my helpful girl." He set Catherine down and turned to Eliza, his eyes softening as they always did when he looked at her. "And how's my beautiful wife?" he asked, pulling her into an embrace. "Missing you," Eliza admitted, relaxing against him. 3 days is too long. Samuel kissed her thoroughly, ignoring William's theatrical gagging noise. "Never again," he promised. "Next time you're all coming with me." "What's in the package, Papa?" William asked, eyeing the parcel on the horse with undisguised curiosity. Samuel grinned. "Patience, son. Let me get settled and I'll show you after breakfast." Over a hearty meal of oatmeal, eggs, and fresh biscuits, Samuel regaled them with tales of Boyce's growth and the business he'd conducted there. The Clayton Ranch had prospered over the years, expanding from a modest homestead to a successful operation with hired hands and a reputation for quality stock. Finally, when the children could contain their curiosity no longer, Samuel retrieved the mysterious package from the porch. "This is something special," he explained, setting it on the cleared table. "Something I've been planning for a while." He unwrapped the brown paper to reveal an ornate family Bible, its leather cover tooled with intricate designs. "Every family should have one," Samuel said, opening it carefully to the front pages. "Look here." The family record pages were partially filled in Samuel's neat handwriting. At the top was their marriage date, followed by William's birth date and adoption date, and then Catherine's birth. Below that was a space clearly waiting for more entries. "It's beautiful," Eliza said, running her fingers over the gilt-edged pages. "A perfect record of our family." "There's more," Samuel said, turning to the back of the Bible. There, secured between the pages, was an official document. "I had the lawyer and boys draw this up. It's the deed to the ranch with both our names on it, equal partners as we should be." Eliza stared at him in surprise. "Samuel, you didn't have to, I wanted to," he interrupted gently. "Everything we have we built together. This just makes it official." William, who had been examining the Bible with solemn interest, looked up. "Papa, there's lots of empty spaces in the family part. Are we getting more babies?" Samuel glanced at Eliza with a raised eyebrow, and she felt a blush rise to her cheeks. They had discussed adding to their family recently, and though they had been careful, there was a possibility. "Would you like more brothers and sisters, son?" Samuel asked. William considered this seriously. "Yes," he decided, "but not too many, just enough so I'm still the oldest." Samuel laughed and ruffled his son's hair. "We'll see what we can arrange." Later that night, with the children tucked in bed and the house quiet, Eliza and Samuel sat together on the porch swing he had built the previous summer. The ranch sprawled before them, bathed in silvery moonlight, the expanded barn, the corrals, the bunkhouse for the hands, and the garden now lush with vegetables and surrounded by flowers. "I have something to tell you," Eliza said, nestling against Samuel's side. "Something I've suspected for a few weeks now." Samuel turned to look at her, his expression curious. "What is it?" Eliza took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "I think we'll be filling in another line in that family Bible come winter." Joy bloomed across Samuel's face. "Truly." "You're certain?" "Not completely," Eliza admitted, "but I recognize the signs. I've done this twice before, after all." Samuel pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Another little Clayton. William will be thrilled to remain the oldest." "And what about you?" Eliza asked, looking up at him. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "That rainy night when I found you on the street, I had no idea I was finding my entire future." Eliza thought of the frightened, desperate young woman she had been, thrown out of her home with nowhere to turn. How far she had come from that dark place, how completely her life had transformed through love and acceptance. "I thought my life was over when my father cast me out," she said softly. "Instead, it was just beginning." Samuel's arms tightened around her. "No regrets, even with all the hardship at the start." "Not one," Eliza assured him. "Everything that happened led me here to you and our children. How could I regret any of it?" They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the swing moving gently beneath them. Finally, Samuel spoke again. "I saw your father in town last week," he said carefully. "He's not well. The store is struggling without you to help run it." Eliza tensed slightly. In the years since their estrangement, Harold Caldwell had made no attempt to reconcile with his daughter. He had not acknowledged his grandson's birth nor his granddaughter's, though Eliza had sent formal announcements of both. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said, meaning it despite everything. "But I don't see what it has to do with us." Samuel hesitated. "He asked about you, not directly, mind you, but he listened when I mentioned how well you're doing, how clever William is getting with his letters, how Catherine reminds me of you." "He did." Eliza couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. Samuel nodded. "Pride's a powerful thing, Eliza. Sometimes it takes a man a long time to admit when he's wrong. But I saw something in his eyes when I mentioned the children, something like regret." Eliza considered this. The hurt her father had inflicted was deep, the words he had spoken unforgivable in many ways, and yet, "He's their only grandparent," she said slowly, "and people can change. You taught me that." Samuel pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. If you want to try to mend that fence, we'll do it together. If you'd rather leave the past buried, that's fine too." Eliza was quiet for a long moment. "Perhaps we could invite him to Sunday dinner," she said finally. "Just once to see, for the children's sake." "For the children," Samuel agreed, though they both knew it was as much for Eliza herself a chance to close a painful chapter of her life with dignity and grace. "I love you, Samuel Clayton," Eliza said, turning in his arms to face him. "You've taught me what family truly means." "And I love you, Eliza Clayton," he replied, his blue eyes shining in the moonlight. "You and our children are the greatest blessing a man could ask for." As they sat together under the vast Idaho sky, Eliza thought of the journey that had brought them to this place, a journey that began with desperation and fear, but had led to a life richer and more beautiful than she had ever dared to dream. From that first moment when a kind cowboy had said, "You can stay at my place," to this quiet evening surrounded by the life they had built together, it had been a path of healing, growth, and deepening love. Whatever the future held, another child, perhaps reconciliation with her father, and certainly more years of building their ranch and raising their family, Eliza knew they would face it together, with the same courage and commitment that had carried them through every challenge so far. In the end, that was all that mattered. Not the judgments of others or the mistakes of the past, but the family they had created through choice and love, a family that had room for forgiveness, growth, and endless possibility. In the years that followed, the Clayton family flourished. Eliza gave birth to twin boys that winter, Robert and James, who grew into sturdy, mischievous youngsters with their father's charm and their mother's intelligence. The family Bible filled with dates and names, each entry a testament to the life Samuel and Eliza had built from unlikely beginnings. Harold Caldwell did come to Sunday dinner, and though the reunion was initially strained, the sight of his grandchildren gradually softened the old man's heart. He never explicitly apologized for his cruelty, but in time he became a regular visitor to the ranch, bringing gifts for the children, and eventually offering William a position at the store when he was old enough, an olive branch Eliza recognized for what it was. The ranch prospered under Samuel and Eliza's joint management, becoming one of the most respected in the territory. They added more rooms to the house as their family grew. But the rocking chair always remained in the place of honor by the fireplace, a symbol of the love that had transformed two wounded souls into a family stronger than either could have imagined alone. And on quiet evenings, long after the children were grown with families of their own, Samuel and Eliza would still sit together on the porch swing, watching the sun set over the land they had tamed together, grateful for that stormy night that had changed everything. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Eliza would sometimes ask, her hand still fitting perfectly in his after all these years. And Samuel would always smile that rare, transformative smile that was reserved for her alone. "From the moment I saw you standing proud in the rain," he would say, "I knew you were my future." It wasn't the life either of them had planned, but it was the one they had built together, a testament to the healing power of love and the family they had created, not through blood, but through choice, commitment, and unshakable faith in each other.